presentation. Now we want to go to a panel discussion that is going to be on fostering international cooperation for a secure and open internet. So I'd like to call in the panelists, and then we can be able to proceed. Our first panelist, ladies and gentlemen, is the advocacy lead East and Central Africa at Mozilla. Help me appreciate Muthuri Kathure. Muthuri Kathure, welcome on stage. We are glad to have you. And has a key focus on promoting equality and non-discrimination access to justice and media freedoms. Our next panelist is a senior program officer, research and advocacy at the Collaboration on International ICT Policy for East and Southern Africa, that is CIPESA. And he will be joining us virtually, but let's appreciate him. Paul Kimumwe. Paul Kimumwe, a round of applause. He's going to be joining us virtually. Our next panelist is the Deputy Head of Mission, Slovak Embassy. Please help me appreciate with a warm round of applause Charlotte Marie Matušová. As she comes on stage, we are glad to have you. Thank you. And our next panelist is a senior policy analyst at Access Now. Please help me appreciate none other than Bridget Andere as she comes forward. Glad to have you here, Bridget. And also in the panel, we have the CEO at Tespok, and this is none other than Fiona Asonga to come and join us in the panel. Fiona Asonga. I had seen Fiona. Yes. Please, a round of applause for Fiona Asonga as she comes forward. I also need to mention that she has the award of the top 50 women in management in Africa 2023. Glad to have you here. And this particular panel, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be moderated by a lady who is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and also Digital Rights and Policy Programs Officer at Article 19, Eastern Africa. Please help me appreciate with a warm round of applause Angela Minayo as she comes forward to moderate this discussion. Welcome, Angela, and also to the panelists. We are glad and honored to have you here. Go for it and take it away.
Thank you. My name is Angela Minayo, and I'll be moderating this session. I work at Article 19 Eastern Africa, and Article 19 works for a world where we can speak and have access to information freely. To first of all introduce the session, this session is titled Fostering International Cooperation for a Secure and Open Internet. So this session aims to delve into the innovative solutions, regulatory frameworks, and initiatives that foster international cooperation and open internet and ensure protection of human rights in the digital realm. It will also consider the roles of the stakeholders and the impact of internet and digital platforms for peace, civic participation, and in combating online misinformation and disinformation. We are joined on this panel today with Muthuri Kathure, Paul Kimumwe, Charlotte Marie, and Bridget Andere, and Fiona Asonga. Welcome very much, panelists, and I look forward to this conversation. I'm going to start with Muthuri from Mozilla. The question to you is, how can the internet and digital platforms be leveraged to promote peace, civic participation, and social cohesion, particularly in the context of online misinformation and disinformation? And maybe you can give us more context on why disinformation and misinformation.
Thanks very much. As you've heard, my name is Muthuri Kathure. I work for Mozilla as the advocacy lead for East and Southern Africa, not Central Africa, as the MC mentioned. Mozilla Foundation is the not-for-profit arm for Mozilla Corporation. To the questions in terms of how we can use internet as well as digital platforms to enhance safety, security, look into activism, look at around accountability. First and foremost, it's a very interesting combination. And I was thinking to myself how those four things can sit together. Peace on one side, freedom of expression on the other side, information integrity there as well, and then civic engagement. And the other day I was watching one of the Gen Z leaders, and he was asked about peace, and he said, we don't want peace, we want liberation. And you know, such a statement might make it look like, is it possible to have civic engagement? Is it possible to have meaningful accountability and at the same time talk about peace, especially at the moment where you're looking at misinformation and disinformation in this context? And I was thinking of the first thing is around the narratives that are built around these things. If you listen to some of the statements that are made by our leaders when you're looking at internet, peace, and on the other side, freedom of expression and activism, it makes it look like it's not possible. Last year, before the Azimio Maandamano, one of the leaders said that they are not going to switch off the internet. And I was in a space with Bridget, and I remember us saying, no, it can't happen, it won't happen. It didn't happen. Come to this year, a couple of statements were made again by leaders. You know, I think yesterday a leader said, we've given out free Wi-Fi, and you know, now it's being misused. It should be used in this way. So making it look like internet is bad, or it's being misused. And a couple of days ago, a leader said, you know, I have the machineries, I have the power to switch off the internet if you keep on misusing it. And so these narratives and acts that we've seen elsewhere makes it look like, no, internet cannot be used for good. Internet for good is just on paper, and it's nothing practical. Then you look on the other side and you see the gains and the wins that, you know, internet accessibility has brought us. The whole Gen Z movement is a good example. You know, the movement started online. We can quote other movements, the Arab Spring that started there, the whole conversation that is going on in Bangladesh, and the action that went to it after, you know, by switching off the internet. So it makes it look like, no, I don't think internet can be used to bring, you know, to bring good. And examples will be cited of instances where internet has led to chaos, to use the list. They'll say, look at Yemen, these things started here, and what have you. So coming to this panel conversation and starting to look at it from the other side and asking ourselves, can internet, first of all, be used? Is there internet for good? Can internet be used in this case? And in the presentation that was made a few minutes ago got me thinking again, look, another narrative can come up, you know, in the context of information integrity. The internet, again, through the digital platform, propagates misinformation and disinformation. The two photos that we saw there, one coming from France, another one from Uganda, and we'll be like, you see, it's even, it's adding even more problems. And I remember there was a phrase during the Gen Z thing, aura for aura, propaganda for propaganda. And so it makes it look difficult. But then I think there are opportunities for us to use internet to promote, you know, peace, to promote social accountability, and we have examples for the social accountability. But if you look at projects, for example, like Social Media for Peace, that's being led by UNESCO and Article 19 here, you see there are actually opportunities that are there for us to work towards this. If you look around the issues of international cooperation, a good document or a good platform that can be used, for example, is the Global Digital Compact. Link that to the SDGs and see, hey, Internet for Good, SDG 17, how can this interact? Now let me move to the digital platforms, which have been seen to be, you know, so you move from internet accessibility and you say, look, this is happening, then to the platforms that are there. And often at times the conversation about platforms is usually the social media platforms that you have. So we'll talk of the X, and good examples have been given there, the rise of TikTok now and the rest. But more into that we've seen even more to it now, especially, again, I'll go back to the Gen Z revolution, with, you know, other civic custom-made kind of platforms. The custom ChatGPT that has been discussed, Zello that was downloaded, I think, by 40,000 people in Kenya and used during the revolution, has also been a tool for it. And before that, we've had, during the elections, digital platforms that have been used to debunk lies, misinformation, and disinformation. The likes of Fumbua, I think the beginning of Africa Uncensored and their work then, we've had for the longest time one of the things that we are proud of in Kenya, Ushahidi, that has been used for the same. So there are actually platforms, and internet can also be used for it. Now, in terms of looking forward, and internet agreeing can be used for good. Digital platforms beyond the social media platforms too can be used for good. What needs to be done for us to ensure that actually these platforms and internet are used for good? Regulation has been discussed. And they made example of the opportunities that we have at the global level. The other day, the African Union endorsed the African Digital Compact as well as the Continental AI strategy. So those are some of the tools, I think, in terms of regulation that we have at the regional and, the continental and international level. Locally, we have a lot of legislation and regulations that from the Constitution, freedom of expression, all the way to the many laws, cybersecurity laws with all its mistakes, the Kenya Information Act and the rest. I think with all these legislation and using them appropriately, then internet and digital platforms indeed can be used for good, especially when you're looking at information disorder in Kenya.
I'll move to Bridget Andere from Access Now. Bridget, my question to you is, how can governments, civil society, and the private sector collaborate to address the root causes of misinformation and disinformation, and to promote fact-based and trustworthy information online? If you could give us examples of the root causes of misinformation and disinformation, that would be great.
Thank you, Angela. First of all, I think we have to interrogate what the root of misinformation and disinformation is. Most of the time, comes about as a result of informational vacuums and capacity vacuums. These informational vacuums can either be organic or inorganic, manufactured, occurring naturally. And so another thing that we kind of have to come to terms with as we have this conversation is that it cannot be one or the other. We will never have the opportunity to choose to either have a perfectly ordered informational system or a disordered information, one or the other. If the disordered information exists, then we cannot have good information. That's not how it works, right? And so once we think of it like that, then we can go into kind of the solutions and talking about what a better information structure and system looks like. And so, of course, even when you look at the theme of this gathering, and something that I like to make fun of Gigi about all the time is that multi-stakeholderism. That's the name of the game. We all have to work together. Everybody has a role to play. And so when you look at kind of the players when it comes to misinformation, disinformation, we have government and authorities, we have companies and platforms, and then we have the people, and we have civil society, right? And everybody has a role to play. So when I think about who has what role, the first thing that comes to mind for me is, the reality that we must have goodwill and intentional engagement. When we talk about goodwill, we also have to think about legislative goodwill. And you see, I think even Muthuri has mentioned cybercrime acts, there's social media laws all over the region, fake news laws that seek to curtail the freedom of expression. And of course, in as much as we recognize that disinformation and misinformation is not something that we should rejoice in as much as Angela has asked, is all misinformation bad? Of course, it depends on how it is being used, what end it is being used to further. So at the end of the day, in as much as we want to regulate and moderate content on platforms. We also have to recognize that this regulation and limitation of rights, because it is a limitation of the freedom of expression at the end of the day, has to be proportional, has to be necessary, has to be legitimate, it has to be legal. So putting in place laws and legislations that go above and beyond to curtail any form of speech is really not the way to go. And at the same time, when you look at platforms, when you're talking about goodwill and intentional engagement, I know a lot of civil society people in this room have had at one time or the other a conversation with a platform, with somebody, trying to make their policies better, but at the end of the day, it needs to come to something, right? And, you know, another thing that we have to come to grips with is that disinformation and misinformation is nothing new. It's just that it's taking on a different model. I'm sure when my grandmother was a young girl, disinformation was from house to house, right? You had to run from your house and take the unsubstantiated gossip down to someone at the river. But now I can text someone the disinformation and catches on very quickly. And so how do we deal with these things? Because again, it comes back to the root cause, the informational vacuums that are created sometimes by people. How are people creating these informational vacuums? By making sure that the freedom of speech is curtailed, by shutting down the internet, by shadow banning. We've just heard about shadow banning, by banning platforms, by restricting access to certain platforms. Even just governments even refusing access to information through other acts like the Official Secrets Act, Public Secrets Act, things like that. So those are the kind of things that we need to interrogate when we're talking about goodwill and intentional engagement. The second thing is, of course, the promotion of human rights, and I've touched on that a little bit. When limiting human rights, we have to ensure that they're limited in a manner that, you know, promotes the rule of law, promotes the spirit of those human rights. If we're going too far, what are we doing? We're taking away from the spirit of the Constitution in most situations. We're taking away from the spirit of that law. We're taking away from the right in itself as it's supposed to exist. And so even as we're thinking about how to get rid of misinfo and disinfo that is harmful, we need to think about how best to do it in a way that doesn't curtail human rights. And then transparency and accountability. And this goes to, you know, governments, it goes to platforms as well. What does this transparency look like? If I'm formulating a law, how do I ensure that people are engaging with it from the onset? If I'm making decisions, are there any mechanisms for review? Is there any way for someone to be notified before a decision is made? This goes to platforms, of course, and content moderation. How do we ensure that people have a good view of the decisions that are being made, of policies that affect them? We've many times heard, especially with platforms, that people don't necessarily even know the standards and policies and rules that exist on these platforms, but at the same time they're subject to them. We've talked about many times having these really long-form standards and policies that nobody reads, and even if they read, they don't understand them necessarily, and we just want to click accept so we can use the service anyway. So how are we making sure that there is a lot of transparency around this? There's transparency around how decisions are made around content. There's transparency as to what the rules are, what kind of language you can use, what kind of conduct is allowed on a platform, and how to conduct yourself when, you know, publishing something, saying something, putting something out there. And accountability can be done in many ways, so can transparency. You know, we have human rights due diligence, we have transparency reporting, accountability mechanisms that are independent and baked into processes that can be used in order to moderate content. And then, even more importantly, equity. I think this is a very huge conversation to be had. We can talk about equity all day, every day. You know, a lot of the times with the lack of context that occurs with a lot of platforms and service providers, it's very easy for people to fall into a trap where they're, you know, accused of spreading misinformation or disinformation, where misinformation, disinformation is spreading much faster than it's supposed to, because there's no capacity or training on the part of platforms for people to actually, whether it's reporting and having something taken down on time, it's not done. Which means what? The disinformation continues to spread. So equity is a very huge conversation that we need to have, especially when it comes to platforms. Are they investing as much as they should in the context that they need to invest in? Probably not. And that's something that needs to be done in order for disinformation, misinformation to stop taking root as much as it is now. And then, of course, the CSOs. I'm obviously civil society, and we have a role to play as well. And, I may be biased, but I think we are doing a pretty good job. We do a lot of research, we put things out there, we are making publication, making sure that their engagement and ensuring we have very cogent and congruent, we have solid recommendations for platforms, for governments, in order to make sure that disinformation, misinformation is not taking root and is not becoming more harmful than it already is. Awareness raising. This goes to really every stakeholder in this, in this mess that is the information system. As long as people know what misinformation and disinformation is and what it does and what it doesn't do, what it can do, the harm that it could cause, then it changes things drastically. People need to know if there's a law, what the law is. People need to know if there's a policy, what the policy is. People need to know what misinformation is in the first place, or disinformation. People need to know what the truth is. And then, of course, engagement, both formal and informal, speaking to each other at all times, ensuring that we're kind of on the same page about what needs to be on platforms, what shouldn't be on platforms, what is harmful. We need to kind of come to an agreement about that, what that looks like.
Thank you so much, Bridget. I'm sorry I have to cut you short because we are quite scarce on time. But thank you so much for raising the human rights concerns around content moderation, around how we frame misinformation and disinformation, and how dangerous it is to have governments and corporations as the arbiters of what is true and what is not. I will go back to Paul from CIPESA.
I think as both Bridget and Muthuri have spoken, disinformation has always been there, but in this instance it has taken on a new dimension because of the expansion and penetration of the internet, which has enabled anybody with an internet-enabled phone to create and share and publish content. Especially with the advent of generative AI, which has upped the tempo. So more people are now more tech-savvy, and they are excited to try out the skill that they have acquired. And so, as we know it, how media works, that for legacy media, a lot of times there were systems in place that ensured that whatever went out either on air or in print had to go through certain levels of verification and cross-checking. But with the technology which has empowered everybody to have the capacity to publish, this has vanished. And so there is no more gatekeeping, because one individual is the publisher, is the person who is collecting information, they can document and share. And a lot of people are excited, one, to be the first one to share and publish. They want to, we don't know in most cases the impact of what we are sharing. And so for the most part, we can say that maybe people are sharing in good faith, but also there is a lot of naivety in what we are doing. And so if we remember during the COVID days, there was a lot of misinformation that was shared pertaining to remedies, because people were excited, but also everybody wanted to share information that can be helpful. And in that, we ended up sharing a lot of misinformation and disinformation, which strategy worked for the people who were generating that kind of information. And so a lot of elements have chosen to exploit the situation, because we know that we are working with a population that doesn't understand the impact of what they are doing, particularly not knowing that if I share false information, I don't care so much what the person receiving it or how that person will be reacting and using that information. And so the originators of this kind of disinformation wants to propagate certain narratives. And this happens a lot during protests and political contestations. And as I think the person who presented first demonstrated that there was also a lot of disinformation. And so we are working on a naive population that is ready to share I think share information, being the first one to know. And so, Angela, you asked me to talk about strategies and maybe tools, but I want to prefer to talk a little bit about the strategies. We can discuss the tools a bit later. I think, so for us as CIPESA and many of the people on the panel, we know that there are various strategies and approaches that have been adopted, approaches that have worked, but we just need to do a little bit more. And particularly, especially institutions that are responsible, that are occupying very prime positions, and that can should be able to do a bit more. Especially if you talk about the media, and here we're talking about both legacy and online entities, we need to know that they should not let down their guards. I think verification should remain a cardinal goal and principle for proper journalism. It shouldn't matter that you are a traditional journalist, a blogger, or citizen journalist. Verification should be very critical. You are free to enjoy your right freedom of expression, but you need to also try and exercise it responsibly. So fact-checking should be a cardinal goal. And the other thing that we need also is the escalation of the tendency to be the first one to publish or to share the information. I think accuracy and truthfulness should be the driving factors in whatever we do. But also as individuals, you shouldn't just share off what you receive. I mean, try to verify, and there are specific means of verifying. So if you have internet, that means you have access to some of these such means, but also you can make specific calls to links and find out is this information accurate. This information goes viral because many of us are just willing to share without cross-checking, which really is very dangerous. Yet we can use, we belong to many platforms, we belong to many WhatsApp groups. You can just post and ask, is this correct? If not, then try to put it down. And as I conclude my submission, I think we need to do a lot of collaborative work, one among fact checkers, the media and influencers to flag disinformation content. Now, a lot of times, as we have seen, fact checkers don't want to, or maybe they don't have opportunity to work with the media or with key influencers. Yet we need these through categories of people to be working together. Because media, for the most part, they are not equipped to do fact checking. Yet we have institutions that are specializing, they're getting training, they're getting skills to do fact checking. So, and the influencers that we have, we also need to work together so that whatever has been fact checked can also go viral and then be flagged and be put down. Then individual users, we need to try and be a bit more careful in what we are receiving, but also choosing to forward. You don't have to forward everything. I think there are no medals. So if we try to limit and the cross-check before posting, I think we shall have a better world. And also raising awareness, mainly collaboratively. Bridget spoke about it. So we need to do a lot of training for the population on media literacy, particularly what does it mean for you to be sharing whatever you are sharing. Don't just share, but look at the implications of what you are sharing. And I think we don't need more laws to regulate how we communicate. We have enough. Of course, incidentally, we just need maybe to decriminalize freedom of expression, but try to work on the population. We cannot keep legislating on every right that we have because there are a few people who are violating it. So we're just working with the individuals to make sure that the information we are sharing is accurate, truthful, and be willing to ask for verification. I think I can end now.
Paul, thank you so much. You have shared much on the need for cross-checking, the need for fact-checking both by media houses and influencers before they share information on these platforms. My next panelist is Charlotte. My question is, what innovative solutions and regulatory frameworks are recommended to foster international cooperation and maintain an open internet?
Hello. So first of all, thank you for the question. And just to clarify, I don't really have any cybersecurity background or ICT or anything similar compared to my fellow panelists. But this is a good and relevant question, especially when we're talking about international cooperation. Living in the era of internet and basically the digital age, it is becoming more and more important to be able to cooperate and work together than it was ever before. So basically the internet has no borders. The challenges and opportunities that it brings with it have no borders. That's why the cooperation must be international. We must seek other partners also outside of the world, and I believe it's irrelevant if it's a small country partner or a big one. Let's say Slovakia, we are a very small country, yeah? So the population of Slovakia is 5.5 million. I believe that's like Nairobi, right? But still, there's always something we are able to learn from the way Kenya does things in the internet and the cyberspace, and vice versa. So this is a good topic to speak on. And here I would basically just raise maybe a few points regarding on how to go forward. So it's not going to be anything new, basically, because all of these things have been here for a while. We've all been doing it. And I believe the most strong of the ways of how we can foster international cooperation to make the internet a safer and better place is obviously through public-private partnerships, which was already addressed here. Collaboration between governments, tech companies, and civil society, that's something that needs to be strengthened. So I think there's something on each of the sides that everyone can bring in, and having those incentives for the tech companies and for the private sector to engage and work together with the government, that needs to be strengthened, and that's something that we should be working on further on. Pooling of resources, expertise, and innovative capabilities, that's the way forward, basically. The next point, I'll try to be brief because I can see the time is ticking. But to summarize, basically, capacity building and education, and that's something I believe all of you touched upon before. So being able to educate children from young age, that's crucial and key. If we start from the young age and they get used to the way of perceiving that the internet can have many challenges and disadvantages as well, but the opportunities are something to be focused on also. So bringing that from the young age to children is going to change the future. Basically, they are the future. They are the next generation who is going to bring it forward. So teaching also critical thinking, because the misinformation and disinformation, it's always going to be there. We're not going to be able to stop it in any time soon. So just spreading out the message on how to work with this information, how to fast cross-check, and how to be able to critically analyze it and to decide whether, yes, this is something that can be reliable to a certain degree, or no, this I cross-check and I can see this is not truthful information, so I won't be sharing it further on. So capacity building and education. And on the capacity building side, Slovakia is cooperating with Kenya. We're very happy to be doing this. Hopefully there will be many more activities. We've been working with KeIGF2024 as well, with the Kenyan government, bringing in experts from Slovakia. And having these expertise exchange programs, that's something that I think we can work more on and bring it forward more, because basically we have the internet as an innovative solution of fostering international cooperation. We don't really have to travel the world to be able to meet and share the knowledge that we have. So we can just connect online, as Paul is connected now, and do some workshops, share the knowledge that we have and skills, and basically through this we can make it better, safer, and more open, the internet. Regulatory frameworks, there's plenty of them, so obviously not going to even touch upon that. But this brings me back to the education. There's so many regulatory frameworks and standards that some people and some companies get lost in this. So again, education, spreading awareness on this, and the standards and frameworks to make them more cohesive and included for everyone. For example, in the European Union, we have the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, and it's standardized and it helps to make the environment more attractive because it secures the personal data and information. So having this in like regional standards and agreements, that's something that could make it easier for the future. I'll stop there to give some time to my other panelists as well, but yeah, international cooperation, not being afraid to ask for help, to reach out for help, to ask what's the issue, and then to join forces together like this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. You've raised very important solutions regarding the fact that the internet has no jurisdiction and it forces states to collaborate both on security as well as ensuring that the internet infrastructure remains open. My next question is to Fiona, and I'll give a bit more context. Kenya had an internet disruption recently. And that internet disruption did not just affect Kenya, it affected our neighboring countries, which are landlocked and they depend on Kenya's internet infrastructure. My question to you, Fiona, with that in mind is, what are the key sustainability and long-term impact considerations for initiatives aimed at promoting an open internet, protecting human rights?
With fairness, to answer that question, I need 15 minutes, and I'm seeing that your timer has 6 minutes. So I'll try to be as concise as possible. What is the internet? It's a network of networks. Because it is a network of networks, that means that it is not possible for the internet to be locked to one country in the sense that countries are not able within the internet space to reinforce jurisdiction over the functioning of the internet. That said and done, the way Kenya has built its infrastructure for the internet since 2013, in 2013, both private sector, government working together developed a vision for Kenya to be an ICT hub and to be the region's hub to serve the region with internet connectivity and to be the lead in ICT. So as a result of that vision, our infrastructure is not built in a manner to separate traffic for Kenya, traffic for Uganda, traffic for Rwanda, traffic for DRC Congo, Southern Sudan, Ethiopia, and everyone else who lands at the landing station. And this was because Mombasa, being the landing station for already by that time 2 of the submarine cables, the only ones we had then, was looking as a favorable spot, and we're trying to position it as a favorable location for East African cable landing, submarine cables landing. That said and done, going back to the issue of internet disruption, I do not know, and I still don't have the facts to be able to confidently say that there was a significant disruption. Reason being, local internet traffic was working. Content that we are hosting locally in the country and is connected to the exchange point was working without any problem. And so certain service providers seemed to have been facing challenges. And those challenges could be as a result of several factors. However, as a principle, as an industry association, we can only come public with that information once the respective service providers have informed us on what the exact issue was. We have not yet received reports. We are waiting for the reports. And I can only stand on the public communication that was already out there. Seacom reported that they'd experienced a cut. Airtel reported they were having disruptions. Safaricom was having disruptions. Liquid Technologies was having some disruptions, but the rest of the service providers seemed to be operating quite well. Our traffic at the exchange point grew by almost 100% during the periods of the demonstrations and when everything was being uploaded online. So then when it comes to service providers and matters of ensuring openness of the internet, what are the things that we look at when you talk about internet openness? We are looking at the principles of ensuring accessibility in terms of ensuring people can be connected, and it is affordable accessibility. And that's affordable of not just the connectivity, but the devices. So it's a longer conversation. Maybe we could have a different session to look into it. Then there is the issue of security, and this goes into matters of integrity of information and misinformation issues, dependability and the safeguards that are put in to ensure that the networks are secure. And then there's the whole issue of privacy. There's been questions raised around privacy and how personal data may have been accessed or given out and mishandled by certain characters. At the end of the day, as service providers, it's not that we do not invest. We have invested, and invested very well, in systems that can ensure openness of the internet and openness of communication. However, our biggest challenge comes in on the laws and regulations. Today, I'm going through an issue of impersonation online. Someone has taken my content and my picture and is using it to scam guys on WhatsApp. It's been several hours. We're not yet done 24 hours, but since yesterday when the issue came up to my attention, we've been following up to try and bring it down, to try and address it. We have to follow the law. See, we are busy activating and advocating for laws and regulations. As civil society, you come in and you support us, and we get these regulations in, and we get these laws in place. In order to respect even the rights of the criminal, we have to follow process. So it's not that service providers should, when it suits now certain issues as civil society is saying, now do. You helped us create the law. That law, we agreed, we signed off on it, all of us. We must follow it. There are things that also technically cannot happen. And technically, for example, we are asked to bring down domains. People expect domains to be brought down in. Thank you. People expect domains to be brought down in 2 hours when it is a phishing domain. But that is not how the technical system behind the domain name works. We need at least 72 hours. So while we're waiting the 72 hours, as the public now, civil society, you start making noise saying nothing is happening. We are following the law. We are following the process. We have invested heavily to ensure that we can maintain communication systems, both the internet and phone and everything, all the communication systems that are aligned to the law, but ensuring you have access to information, your data protection is happening, all the KeIGF, cyber security, everything is happening. So we do all that. So there has never been a situation where, and I don't think it's in the interest of any service provider to run their networks in a manner that they've not sufficiently invested and puts their customers at risk. What happens a lot of the times is we end up in a situation where the demand, like in this situation, our demand for internet connectivity from January to June was at a certain level. Therefore, our infrastructure and investment, including redundancy, were at a certain level. Then one day, it peaks. So when it peaks, it's when we realize, oh, we need to upgrade. And we did the upgrades. We have increased capacities. We have changed the switching gear to be able to accommodate more. And so we are then able to serve the customers so much better in terms of the quality of service they had during the purported disruption, which could have been congestion of pipes, vis-a-vis what our normal service is. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fiona. In short, Fiona says their hands are tied by laws, but she has also explained Kenya's very complex internet infrastructure that I felt needed to be explained as you have, so that as stakeholders we discuss from a point of information and also hear each other's challenges. You've explained how sometimes you think you have enough capacity and then there's more traffic and you're unable to respond. Muthuri, there's a question on how sometimes there is interference by foreign forces. We've had that a lot in the Kenyan protests, so I think you can take that up. There is a question on remedies to regulate, to discipline unregulated fintech actors. No, that's the previous. Yes, there's a question on one woman's misinformation is another man's confirmation. Information that reinforces what we want to believe has power. Why curtail it? It exposes reality. I'll give this to Bridget to talk about the complex and nuances around misinformation. Character assassination, I think we will skip on that. Because of time, let's just answer the two questions. One on foreign interference. You didn't get the question. So the question is, the internet creates both opportunities, the internet both creates opportunities and poses challenges for democratic processes. One challenge is external interference in elections. Suggest solutions. And then the question for Bridget is, one man's misinformation is another man's confirmation. Give us more nuance. 30 seconds.
It's a very vague question, to be honest, in terms of external interference in democratic processes in Kenya. I think, quickly to answer to that question, one is online spaces go beyond our borders, and so any interested party in that conversation will definitely have their opinion in any democratic process. Examples were given in the presentation that was made before of footballers, of world leaders who came out to support the movement that was there. And so it is difficult, to like close the gates in the online space and say, no, you can't engage in the Kenyan democratic conversation. And so it's easy for that. Now, what I cannot respond to is questions of, external forces, the governments. I will not respond to that.
They want you to suggest solutions. How can we counter that? How can we stop external forces from interfering in elections? You cannot answer that. Yeah. You're not at liberty. All right, thank you. Bridget?
Confirmational bias is definitely a thing. And sometimes, I must admit, disinformation, misinformation can be a lot of fun, right? I think Muthuri mentioned aura for aura. When one disinformation was spread, another one to counter it. But the reality is that, and the easiest way to deal with this is to come with the facts. And I think we need to be very proactive in debunking misinformation and saying, this is what has been said by this side, and this is what has been said by this side. In as much as this furthers my agenda, this is the truth. So just debunk the disinformation and misinformation.
Thank you so much for keeping the 30-second rule. I'll now ask the panelists, starting from Paul, to give us their call to action in 30 seconds each. Again, sorry guys. Paul, please, 30 seconds, call to action.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. Just to reiterate, we need to do a lot of media literacy trainings, especially for our population, and challenge especially the progressive freedom of social laws.
Thank you, Paul. I'll go to Muthuri, then Charlotte, in that order.
So my call for action is, building multi-stakeholder engagement should be intentional, should be beyond the walls of this space, should not be extractive, and should be meaningful. We should not have conversations again and again on things that should change for us to have a better digital future. For example, keep talking about investing in content moderation or on internet shutdown. Things should start running. We should not keep repeating the same things.
So I think my one would be to call on all stakeholders to not be afraid to raise their worries, their questions and struggles, and ask for help, because that's the only way forward, basically. If we are not able to, if we don't cover what we don't know, but if we admit, okay, we don't know what this, we need help in this area, and to cooperate in that way. Thank you.
And, you know, as has been already mentioned, multi-stakeholderism is extremely important to the conversations that we'll continue to have. But in addition to that, no matter where you stand, the policies that you create and the standards that you create always have human rights in mind.
I think for my closing remarks, I'll comment on the issue of international cooperation, because at the end of the day, we have, the internet has made everything a small village, so to say, and we have to collaborate, we have to work together. We have to learn from other jurisdictions. When the Gen Z began their campaign, I found out that this is not the first country where leaders are having to go online. Japan has had a history and track record of influencers running their constituents online and then having to sit in parliament to now report and give feedback. So the trend has changed, and we need to move with the trend. And I think for leaders who are listening to this conversation or will be looking at it at some point, they need to realize that times have changed, and we need to change our leadership approach to be more accommodative and more collaborative across the different stakeholders.
Thank you so much, Paul, Muthuri, Charlotte, Bridget, and Fiona. You have been amazing, wonderful panelists, and I've learned so much from you, and I hope the audience has as well. It was a pleasure to host you. Thank you so much.